Welcome to the Beef Lab. I'm your host, Coach Joe Strong, here at the Mecca of Strength and Conditioning, Varsity House Gym. The Beef Lab is an inside look at everything it takes to run a world-class training facility. This is the source for strength entrepreneurs who want to learn more about programming, training athletes, business development, and marketing their brand. We're going to show you how we took Varsity House from a dingy little garage gym to a world-class brand. What's up, gang? Coach Joe here with another edition of the Beef Lab, coming at you live from Varsity House Gym in beautiful sunny New York. We're about to get some more snow, unfortunately. So by the time you're hearing this, reports say 8 to 12 inches, possibly. That's terrible. But with the combine season behind us and pro days underway all around the country, I thought that a great topic for today's Beef Lab would be how to develop a combine-ready athlete. And what exactly does that mean? Over the last 10 years, I've had an unbelievable experience working with a lot of top-level high school and college athletes, getting them ready for either college showcases and or the NFL and pro day combines. So whether you like combines or not, it's just part of the process, and the reality is that it's here to stay. The NFL combine is a giant publicity machine and is a multi-million-dollar moneymaker. There are huge sponsors, Under Armour and Adidas and all these companies that sponsor the NFL combine. There's giant clothing deals on the line, and it's a great way for the NFL to showcase some of their new young talent, right? And people get all fired up to see who's the fastest kid in the country, who's hitting the most reps on the bench press, who's hitting a 11, 12-foot broad jump and so forth. And it's a lot of fun, and the buzz in the gym here, over the last couple months since the NFL Combine, since the last month since the NFL Combine, and now with all the pro days, it has been just a buzz of kids talking about, did you see this guy run his 40? Oh my God, he's so fast. And one of our long-term clients and close representatives here, a kid named Devin Fuller, just crushed his pro day and ran a 4.36 laser time out at UCLA's pro day. So one of the fastest times in the country right now. And so that buzz is not going to go away. And it has filtered down to the high school level. And there are high school combines and showcases all over the country, mostly throughout the summer months. And kids believe, and parents for the most part, believe that it's a great way to showcase their athletes or their kids' athletic talent and ability. You go to one of these showcases, the hopes is that there's a college scout there and that they will see their athlete perform and have an opportunity to improve their status with college recruiters and such, and maybe get a college scholarship. And then beyond college, at the NFL level, it is basically a giant job interview. You have to perform well on some of these prerequisite tests, and then interview well with the different teams. So, with that said, I realize that there is not a lot of true football translation to running a 40-yard dash. Most people, especially for an offensive lineman, he's never going to run that in his life. He's never going to have that upright running form, but it's a necessary way. It's like taking the SAT for high school students coming out of high school to college. There has to be some standardization and a checklist of things that we have to be able to check to make sure that the athlete is qualified to go to the next level. Now, are there some athletes who maybe did not test well, who were good football players, who got lost in the shuffle? Absolutely. Are there some athletes that blow up their combine and then stink in the NFL? Absolutely. It's not a perfect science at all. Vernon Golston, if anybody remembers, was a really good player in college, played at Ohio State, blew up the combine, was an absolute freak, right? Bumped his status up huge. I think he got drafted 6th overall by the New York Jets. He stunk. He barely ever played. He never made it anywhere, got bounced around to a couple teams, and he was done. And the only reason why they kept him on the Jets for more than a year or two was because they had paid him a boatload of dough. And he rode that money train, that first-round pick money train, out for a couple years, and he was bounced out of the league. So there's plenty of stories on either side of that fence. It is part of the process, so you can hate it or love it or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere, okay? So what are some of the things that we're trying to do? Our philosophy when training people for the combine is to develop the most explosive athlete possible, right? And so you have to look at your athletes that you have, and you have to be able to kind of break down what their strengths and weaknesses are. So last year, and this past year, we had a variety of athletes, some big and strong, some small and fast. So depending on what their strengths and weaknesses were is kind of how we determine where the volume of work goes in the weight room and what they need to do in the gym. If they're already really fast and quick, then it's about, performing the drills properly and getting a little bit stronger. If they're already really strong but lack speed and lack technical ability in the drills, then obviously those need to be the focus. And, if a kid can already squat 550, 600 pounds, there's really not much that I need to do with him in that 6, 8, 10, 12-week period that I'm going to have them between the end of college football and the combine in February. So develop the most explosive athlete possible with the best body weight to strength ratio that you can. You want to get your athletes as lean as possible and as strong as possible. So depending on their position, the NFL kind of mandates a high and low. A linebacker, per se, let's say like an outside linebacker, most of them are going to be from 245 pounds to about 255 pounds. That's going to be the sweet spot. Generally speaking, I'm going to come in on the lower end of that, depending on body type and such. I want to be as lean as possible. I want to have the lowest body fat that I can have so that I'm running and moving with the least amount of excess baggage, right? Now, if you're an O-lineman, you can't shed them down to nothing because, if you come in at 275 pounds as an O-lineman, they're just going to tell you you're just too light. You can't play O-lineman in the NFL. So there are some weight constraints and in a sense standards that also have to be kept. But you want, in general, the best body weight to strength ratio possible. Okay. Our philosophy is also that all athletes are inherently weak. Okay, that even though they might be great football players and come from a great football program, they are inherently undertrained in a lot of areas, and they are missing a complete package of physical abilities. We have kids who come in and squat 500-600 pounds, right? But they can't do a lunge with 135 pounds. They have no overhead. I have a kid here, one of our best athletes that kind of grew up in the gym, Mike Riley, who's playing for the Arizona Cardinals now, couldn't overhead press 135 pounds. He could bench press 4, squat 550, deadlift 550, couldn't overhead press 135 pounds. So he was very imbalanced in his strength and power. So those are some things to think about. For the combine training, the Olympic lifts are overrated, okay? And the reason that I say that is because most athletes do not have the technical ability to perform them at the weights and percentages needed to elicit the explosive power that I'm looking for. And I don't want anyone getting hurt. So, and I can't waste a second of time that we have here to train. So I don't do them at all in a combine training program. Not because I can't teach them in a period of time, but because I can teach other things much faster and we can get right to training and get things moving. So instead of taking an entire day of training to teach a kid how to clean or snatch properly and take the chance of hurting their wrist or shoulders, I'm doing a lot of other things like box jumps and med ball throws and things and such. And we've talked quite a bit about those things in the past before. And lastly, it's attitude. It's attitude. And the attitude of your combine training has to be work, business, get it done. I'm here to do a job. And, and the attitude of the gym needs to all be on board. Everybody in the gym needs to be fired up for that group of guys. Need the entire staff, from the head coach all the way down, needs to be ready to rock and roll so that the intensity and the atmosphere after a period of weeks is maintained. You can't have, after 2 or 3 weeks of training, guys coming in like, oh, I'm tired, man. No, it's got to be every day. Woo, we're fired up. It's time. It's the biggest job interview of your life. You got to get ready for it. You got to be, the mental state is critical to the athlete's ability to come in and train hard every day. Our guys are here 5, 6, sometimes 7 days a week, and that can be a drag and a drain in and of itself. All right? So how do we do it? And what are some of the key components of our combine training program here? And so if you don't know already, let's just talk about some of the events, right? So the combine is basically a bunch of standardized testing events. The 40-yard dash, a 20-yard shuttle called the Pro Agility, a 5-10-5 shuttle, a 3-cone drill, L drill, where the athlete goes up and around, circles around the cones, a vertical jump, a broad jump, a 60-yard shuttle generally, which is another shuttle run, bench press for reps, and then a variety of skill position drills depending on the position of the athlete. So you have this standardized list of drills, and then your skill position work, where they could kind of look at you, like if you're a receiver, you're going to be catching balls. If you're a defensive back, you're going to be, you're going to be running, you're going to be backpedaling and changing direction and covering receivers and such like that. They want to see your footwork. They want to see fluidity in your hips. They want to see if you're loose and open and you can move fluidly, or if you're looking stiff and heavy-footed. All right, those are some of the things that the NFL scouts are looking for. Okay, so the basic ideology of our training program is we use a conjugate block periodization, and for basically we break it down into three 4-week blocks for the athletes that are here for that period of time, and if they're coming in late or early, we just kind of augment the plan a little bit. But our general program has, traditionally 2 max effort days, upper and lower, 2 speed days, okay? And these are speed power days, and this is run and speed power. We do not have a speed upper day like you would see in like a West Side barbell split where it's like speed bench pressing. These are 2 speed days, speed running, speed power. One day, linear speed and explosive power. The next day, change of direction and explosive power development, separated by a day in between, so that we have CNS recovery. Generally, 1 power endurance day. That's like a conditioning and cardiovascular aerobic day. We kind of mix some things there, and a couple days for regeneration, flexibility, mobility. So it's a complete program where the athletes are coming to the gym just about every day. So our first block of training is basically, the idea there is to acclimate the athletes to the lengthy schedule. Most athletes are coming out of college, it's practice, it's training 3 to 4 times a week max. And in my opinion, the training schedule or the intensity level at most college programs is not that high. And the athletes come here and they're working much harder and with a much faster pace and with a greater volume of training. So we have to acclimate them to the process. So our first block we just call acclimation and maximal strength development. We spend most of the time in block 1 getting strong. We spend a lot of our speed work just doing the technical aspects of the drills, learning the drills and going over the drills dozens and dozens and dozens of times. In that 4-week period, we probably take several hundred reps in each of the drills, at least in the starts. The 40 start and setup, 10-yard starts, 5-10-5 L drill, practice lightly, on the broad jump and vert, and just kind of setting your body up and make sure that by the time we get through that first 4 weeks, that muscle memory is taken over, and it's really just, it's like riding a bike. Every time I step up to the line to run my 40, it's so ingrained. I've done it so many times that I could do it blindfolded with my eyes closed and get my footwork and my placement and my hand and body in the right position each time. So we take a ton of reps, and that's really, rep acclimation. Block 2, we kind of convert to a strength power, and it's a lot more complex training, a lot of the use of the accommodating resistance, bands and chains and things like that, a lot more explosive work, and we start full speed drilling in block 2. So that second month, we start running full speed on a lot of our drills. Now we're still not running full out 40s probably at this time. It's mostly 10s and 20s because of the much far less chance of injuries, and that is really the key to the 40-yard dash is that acceleration start, and a lot more conditioning in that second phase to get the body weight and the body composition where it needs to be. So, we're weighing them in each week, we're taking their body fat and muscle mass analysis each week, and we're really careful with their diet and critical about where their body composition comes in during that second block, and making sure that we get into the right, because now, as we get to block 3, depending on when the athlete came, we might only have 2 to 4 weeks before the actual combine, and then maybe a couple weeks leading up to their pro day, depending on what they're doing. And that is, again, that it is critical that body composition is where it needs to be, and we're not trying to cut weight or anything drastically before leading right into the combine. You don't want to do anything like that. And then as we finish out, it's all about speed and power. We're lightening up on the weights. If you've squatted a bunch, and if your strength is going to be what it's going to be at that point. The weights are dropped, and the band tension is generally very high. We do a lot of explosive eccentric, overspeed eccentric work during that period of time, but with much less volume, with a real high intensity though. And the idea there is to maintain or increase explosive power output while deloading the joints a little bit, and really focusing on the drills, the 40, the 5-10-5, the L drill and such, and their skill position work. And we spend that last month really just running, and getting the locomotive abilities really high, and peaking that locomotive ability for the specific dates of the combine or their pro day. Just like any training variable, running speed and ability has to be volumized and programmed to a peak so that they can maximize their potential, and then there's going to be a natural dip. So after the combine or pro day, we'll deload, right? We'll take a little bit of time off. Maybe they just come in and do some recovery work, some aerobic work, some bodybuilding work and things like that. We'll give them a week to 10 days to deload their central nervous system and body, and then we'll start the process back up until they leave for OTAs and off-season training, and or the draft, depending on where we're at in that training program. Okay. So in the show notes, I'll put some specific examples of blocks and things like that, and how we do our blocks with some examples of the training week splits and such. And I have an example of those, and kind of just show, you know, how the intensity of things increases over time. And really, you know, again, the idea is to start with a heavy volume of weight training to get the muscles and the connective tissue really strong. And as that volume of weight training decreases, the volume of speed training increases, and are kind of inversely proportional to each other. And so I can maximize my explosive power development and the explosiveness of my athletes. Okay. I've seen a lot of guys, you know, and a lot of college programs and some combine programs. I mean, there's a bunch of good programs around the country, but a lot of guys chase strength too much. And you know, we had a couple, you know, we've had a bunch of awesome athletes come through the doors, and it really depends on, you know, what they need. Some athletes are very strong, and strength then is not the determining factor in their ability. It's either neurological output and the ability to create force and therefore speed, or technical ability. They don't run right. They don't know how to run clean. They were like an offensive lineman, and their position didn't require them to run in a straight line for 40 yards, and they probably were the big kid in high school, right? So they threw shot put. They didn't run track. They didn't have, and then you have the skinny wide receiver or D-back who's, you know, long, lean, tall, muscular, athletic, and he can run and jump like a gazelle, but maybe he can't squat 315, right? So strength will help his explosive power and ability and give him some protective body armor for the NFL, and the other guy needs some speed work. So maximum strength versus maximum power is critical. Finding the right balance is key, right? We love using accommodating resistance, bands and chains. I have to worry about the athlete, not my own training. I don't care about me. If I get hurt training, no big deal. Who cares? Nobody cares about a washed up meathead. Okay? But if I have a potential first-round draft pick who's worth millions of dollars, and I'm trying to push him to a 550-pound squat, and he blows a disc in his back, that's bad, right? The combine training program at Varsity House would be over. That's it, end of story, right? There'd be nothing, no coming back from something catastrophic like that. So using bands and chains is a great way to deload the spine. The tension of the bands is incredibly hard to squat against, but when I'm in the lowest position and I'm sitting on the box, I might only have 225 to 315 on the bar, but as I stand up, the band tension's 550 pounds, great amount of band tension, but on the box, I'm not crushing my spine with a ton of static weight. So we start off using, you know, chains for the first 4 weeks, and then bands from that point on, and we basically start working percentages of their maxes with the bands, and almost work it like a true powerlifting circa max, where the last 3-week wave leading up to the combine or pro day is a circa max of weights working up in band tension and percentage of weight, and you know, we've had an unbelievable, every single athlete we've had come through the training program, high school, college, or pro, has PR'd on their pro day or at their combine and or at a team workout or college showcase. No question, the system works, and finding the right balance of maximum strength and having an athlete who's strong, and then maximizing their ability to create power and force is critical. Now, working with younger athletes, you know, the issue with like a high school athlete is they just don't have a ton of time in training. They don't have, you know, years and years and years of strength training. So you're going to have moderate levels of strength. Some athletes in high school are very strong for high school athletes, and generally what I see is a high school athlete needs to continue to develop maximal strength while developing explosive power output, where like a college athlete, you know, I can almost, in a sense, if he has a high level of strength, if a linebacker comes in here, an offensive lineman comes in here, and he can bench close to 4, overhead 225 for a few reps, squat 5, deadlift 5. He doesn't need to get much stronger than that. So now it becomes about taking that weight and being able to move it really explosively and fast, and creating speed strength and explosive strength power. So I'll put some stuff on the show notes of kind of some more detailed training notes on how we kind of work that. All right, train to the strength of your athletes is key. You know, you can't just create like, here's my combine training program. I see a lot of guys, you know, selling my combine program, right? And you know, you got to take that with a grain of salt. That is just a template that people use. I have a combine training template, right, that I designed. Here is the base idea of the plan that I want to use, and then I have to see which athletes I have. Depending on the athletes I have, depends on the weights, percentages, volumes, and what exercises I might fit into that template. Again, and it also has to do with the trainability of the athlete. I don't know what those athletes know. When an agent calls me here at the gym and says, hey, I'm going to send you one of my guys, then my first question is, you know, do you have a copy of their college strength and conditioning program, or can you get one from me so I can see what exposure they've had to training? You know, had they used bands and chains? Were they a heavy Olympic lifting program? So maybe we can continue to do some of that, and I don't have to worry about teaching the Olympic lifts. Was it a real vanilla, you know, base program where they did the same, you know, typical free squat, you know, hang clean, push press type of stuff, you know, over their college career? Had they ever box squatted? Because we believe that box squatting is the best way to elicit posterior chain development, especially for that short period of time. So do I have to teach a kid, do I have to get him in here early and teach him how to box squat? Does he got to show up 15 minutes early every day and practice box squatting every day till he gets to, for the first 2 weeks, till he gets it down pat? You know, things like that. So training the strength of your athletes is another key and critical component. All right. So for the drills and for, you know, for running a fast 40, you have to, you know, you have to develop an explosive athlete, and explosive power and speed is critical. But people don't realize that you're going to run a bunch of drills on each day. And like at a pro day, you might run all the drills in one shot, where like the NFL combine, it's kind of broken up into a couple days. But at most kids' pro days, you're going to run them all. So you're going to bench press, you're going to broad jump, you're going to vert, you're going to 5-10-5, you're going to run your 40, you're going to do your L drill, you're going to do a bunch of skill work. You need conditioning. You need power endurance work. Power endurance training is the key to being a good football player. So not only for running a combine drills, but for actually showing up and playing football, power endurance is the key. You don't need elite strength. No football player needs to squat 800 pounds or bench press 600 pounds, right? You don't need to be an elite endurance. No football player needs to be an Ironman either. But the middle of that strength endurance continuum, that power endurance, is critical. I need to be really strong, and I need to be in really good shape to play high level football. So we want to develop athletes who are not only strong and explosive, but have a really big engine, right? And they got really good cardio. So our training incorporates a ton of locomotive work, right? Running, sprinting, jumping, moving, right? And cutting, as well as some more non-traditional football style of cardiovascular work, like the Concept 2 rowers, ski ergs, airdyne bikes, and things like that, just for building up GPP and general physical preparedness. You can get a lot of endurance work out of airdyne sprints and rows, IWTs, interval weight training circuits with like kettlebell swings and rows and things like that to finish out a workout and build tremendous conditioning that is still on the level of power explosive conditioning. I'm not sending my guys on 3-mile runs, right? But and you also have to realize that you can only run an athlete so much. If I have a 265-pound football player and I run them too much, I run the risk of hurting their ankles and knees and hips and back and joints and things like that. So you have to consider those things. So on our lifting days, we like to condition using some of the more non-loading implements like the rower, the ski erg, and the bikes, or pulling sleds and things like that, as they do not have the same impact nature on the joints and soft tissue. So a typical finisher for a lifting day might be 10 kettlebell swings, 10 calories on the Airdyne, 10 rounds. Miserable conditioning, right? Hard as hell, but not a lot of pounding on the body, right? And an athlete can recover very well the next day and they'll be fine from that and they can train the next day. Whereas if I did, you know, let's say 10 or 15 hill sprints, you know, their ankles, calves, and Achilles might be too sore to run well the next day. So those are all some things to think about. You have to continue to push the volume of conditioning up, right? And get the conditioning to a high level, but you can't pound the body. So using interval weight training circuits, using different implements, the True Form Runner is really great because it puts a lot less impact on the body, and pushing sleds is really good. Although I have moved away from doing tons of prowler work in our combine training because I think the lactic acid development also takes away from training as well. You can really crush an athlete if you're doing intervals and you do maybe a 10-yard high-low on the prowler and you rest and then do one, maybe that, but like I've seen a lot of abuse on the prowler. It's a phenomenal tool, but for the specifics of the combine, because we have to train 6 days a week and they have to be high output sessions, we don't do too much of it because it beats guys up, you know, and I've seen quite a few injuries and just overwork in the quads and the ankles and calves from that. Okay. So I'll put some ideas there. I'll put some ideas of our power endurance workouts that we do. Our power endurance workouts were like the weekly finisher. That was usually like Saturday for us. We would usually do a bunch of skill work on Saturday, and the athletes would come in and they would run their routes, or they'd practice their pass blocking, footwork, or they'd run their, they'd run the ring, their defensive linemen, they would run, D-line drills and stuff like that. We practice handwork, and then we do some type of power endurance like an IWT or some type of miserable type of interval weight training. Okay. Another key concept of our combine program is, and our last podcast was on this, the last Beef Lab was on volumization and special assistance work. That is the key to all of our training here at Varsity House, and we do the same thing for our combine athletes. If you want an athlete to get good at something, you have to do it all the time. So we not only monitor the volume of weight training very critically, but we pick specific exercises that we know are going to help athletes in specific areas of their abilities, and we literally do them almost every day. So, and we're trying to deload the spine and joints. So we're doing a tremendous amount of band knee extensions, band leg curls, tricep push downs, band arm curls, right? And all of the band-eccentric exercises that help to build up the soft tissue and keep the joint, increase blood flow, right? And help the joints heal between bouts of weight training, jumping, sprinting, and everything else that we're doing. We also monitor the volume of repetitions that they're doing with their skill drills, and we increase that volume over time. You have to take 10, setups, 15, 40-yard setups, 20, 40-yard setups. And it really just becomes so ingrained, and we've done it so many times, that by the time an athlete leaves here, I want them to be sick of me going through the cadence of setting up for your 40-yard sprint. It should be so annoying to them at that point that they don't need me to coach them anymore. That they could coach it themselves. They could coach their little brother on how to run a 40 by the time they leave here. That really is the goal, is to teach them and just drill it and drill it and drill it and drill it until it becomes obsessive. The other thing we do is we pick some of our special assistance exercises. So depending on the specific weaknesses of our athletes. So let's just take Mike Riley, for example, who's been here with me since he was a kid, right? And he's one of our top athletes. And just a great example of someone who has spent a lot of time working on his weaknesses, using special assistance exercises and volumization to create, to fix imbalances. As I said, Mike could not overhead press. Mike overhead pressed every day when he was here for his combine program. And the reason why we did that, we said, well, you don't have to overhead press in football. And how's that helping when you bench press? It helps a lot, right? You get your overhead press up, you strengthen the shoulder girdle, you balance out the strength, you pull those scapula back into position where they should be, right? And it changes the dynamics of your ability to move. It opens up the shoulder girdle. All of a sudden, he's got no more bicep pain. I bet you that'll help with your bicep, with your bench press a lot. No more bicep pain. No more pain in his neck and jaw from his traps doing half the work, right? And just being too weak to stabilize during the bench pressing and stuff like that. So we Z pressed. We did seated Z presses every day as part of his warm up. We did overhead hold walking dumbbells. We did handstands. We did tons of crazy stuff every day. Every day he had to do something over his head. Not heavy, but just constant to build up the volume, to just get those muscles growing, get those muscles activated and firing. Another thing he was really weak on, Mike, if you look at Mike as an athlete, he's very quad dominant. He's got these big giant quads, and he had these flat, he had like a flat non-existent hamstrings. Well, running is mostly posterior chain, right? And again, knee injuries, groin injuries, things like that. You have a one muscle group doing most of the work when another muscle group should be doing, right? So every day, bandit hamstring curls. Every day, 3x20 deadlifts. Very light, 135. Nothing that's going to take away from his training that day. Nothing that's going to hurt him. But over a period of weeks, right? I'll give you an example here. I think I have one here on my thing. So here's what we did with his deadlift. Mike was not a good deadlifter. Here's a guy who can, he wasn't great. He was a 550 squat, and he was struggling in the mid-4s, right, of deadlifting. It should be, equal or better for most athletes on the deadlift, right? And it was just weak in general for where he was. Now he can deadlift 550 for multiple reps, right? We started off with 135. Now this was every day. We did 3x10. And that was part of his warm-up. So his normal warm-up routine might be something along the lines of, typical mobility drills, warm up, get a sweat, 10 minutes on the air bike, whatever. And then, 3x10 Z press, 3x10 deadlift with 135. Do that for a week. Next week, 155. Next week, 175. Slowly but surely. Nothing building up to weights that are at the higher levels of percentages. Everything was below, well below 50% of anything he could handle for a couple sets. Fire up the nervous system, get those hamstrings used. His role was to really concentrate on pulling with the hamstring. We did a lot of sumo deadlifting because that really worked, forced him to really contract his glutes and work his hamstrings and push the ground away to the sides, firing the glutes and hamstrings more. And the results were tremendous. He PR'd on his 440, he crushed his pro day, and his knee pain that he had for 3 years was gone. So the volumization works. You can abuse it, right? You got to be smart with the weights. You can't volumize with 70% of your max. You can only volumize with 30, 40, maybe 50. You start to reach the upper limits of your towards your max, and then you're starting to you will start to see a detraining effect. We got his volumizing on his deadlift up to about 225, and we start to see a little bit of a detraining effect where it was affecting the rest of his workout. So we cut the weight back down. We went back down to 155 and just kept it there and just upped the reps a little bit. So instead of being 3x10, it went to 3x20 or something like that at a much lighter weight. And that was a great way that we used the volumizing and then to increase his weak areas. And some special assistance work too, like bandit good mornings, bandit leg curls, and stuff like that. So again, when you set up your training program, you really have to analyze your athletes and what they're good at, okay? Let's see, let's go through this. The last key concept I'm going to talk about is just drill mastery, right? The drills themselves, okay, are obviously the most important aspect of the whole training program, right? If you can't do the drills properly, no matter how fast and explosive you are, you're not going to run a good time. It is like an Olympic event. You need to, the athlete needs to know from start to finish how many steps it takes to run this drill. When my athletes are done with their combine training and we take them through their final test runs maybe about a week before the actual date of the combine, we'll do some full run-throughs, right? When they run a 40, most of them are looking back at me giving me the thumbs up, like they know that was a PR. They know that they ran a great time because everything felt the way it was supposed to feel, right? They got off the line hard. They took, 6 steps to the 10-yard line, right? They transitioned well from the 15 to 20 to the 25, got upright and running, and felt smooth and light the entire way. We're pulling with their hamstrings, we're running on the balls of their feet, and really explosive. And a lot of guys, I've had multiple athletes literally run through the 40, with their arm up, giving me the thumbs up, and then we check the laser and boom, of course, it's a PR. So that only comes from running the drills so much and so many times. And you can't run 50-40s, so it's all 10s and 20s, The start is everything. It's the setup, it's the first step, and it's the first 20 yards, 10 and 20. Right? And that's where we spend 90% of our training, 95% of our training for the 40. The other drills don't beat you up quite as much, and we would take tons and tons of practice starts and walkthroughs and slow motion video analysis, and they would guys, here, take this CD home. This is today's practice session. Watch yourself run 100 times and just pick it apart and look at what you're doing. Can you lean in a little bit more to your cuts? Could you get your foot out a little bit wider to make that cut a little bit quicker? Can you get your hand positioned in a little bit better spot and things like that, and just kind of help them with the small little details. Remember, we're talking about hundreds of tenths of a second. The difference in a 40, right? Running a defensive lineman who runs a 4.6 in the 4.6s is a stud, right? And is probably a top, 2 or first, second, or third round pick. A defensive lineman who runs a 4.8, too slow. Depending on what their position, like a D end, So those 0.2 of a second can mean millions of dollars. So it is critical that every little piece of that drill is accounted for. So we basically just run those drills. So again, as part of our warm-ups every day, they might take, after their dynamic warm-up, part of their warm-up might be 10 40-yard setups. They would set up on the 10 and they do a rolling 10. And it's basically they just set up and come out hard with one step and then coast out and try and practice getting long and keeping the arms going. Nice and light, low on the CNS intensiveness, and then but practice. When we run all of our 10s, 20s, and drills, everything's on the laser. So when we're going hard, it's on the laser and it's timed and you're under the gun in a sense. The laser don't lie. There's no hand foul ups. There's no mix ups. The laser is the laser, and it's a 4.75 is a 4.75. If you had 10 coaches in your gym and they all timed the laser and they all timed a 40 by hand, everybody would have a different time. The laser is consistent and doesn't lie. Right? And for most people, it's slow as hell and makes everybody mad, but it is what it is. And the data that I get from the laser is critical. So any high school combine that you go to or college pro days, if they're not running lasers, you're not running a real time, right? So if a coach tells you ran a 4.6 and you're in high school, you didn't run a 4.6, buddy. Right? I guarantee it's like a 4.75, 4.8. So if it's not on the laser, it's not a real time, it doesn't count. Okay, in my eyes, and that's that. Now you could be awesome. The NFL scouts, some of those guys are within a couple hundredths of a second, but if it's not on the laser, it's not a real time. That's why the only official time for the NFL is the laser time. All right, I'll put some videos up, give some examples. I have a bunch of great videos of the guys running some of their drills, and I'll put them up. We're really excited about some of the guys we had training and some of the draft picks that we have. and the guys who ran their combines and such. It's going to be an amazing draft in a couple weeks. We're super excited. It really is one of my favorite times to see which players go to which teams. I'm a huge Giants fan, so I always love to see, you know, how the Giants pick and how their picks play out. It's a great time for these young athletes to you know, to kind of soak it all in. You know what I mean? You're talking about going from a college player to a multi-millionaire superstar, you know, in a period of months, and it's a really phenomenal thing to see, and I'm super excited that we are able to be a small part of that process for some of these athletes, and it's a great opportunity. So my final thoughts, okay? The most important thing with training in general, like Bruce Lee said, you have to be like water. You have to be very flexible. You have to conform to the shape, sizes, and abilities of your athletes. That you might have a plan that you stick to, you might have a philosophy that you stand by, and an ideology that is inherent to our gym, but I have to be very flexible and very flowing and understand that I have to mold my system to the athletes I have. A good combine program must be flexible and conscious of the athletes that they have. You must have otherwise, you're just trying to force, you know, a square peg through a round hole, and you're gonna hurt an athlete, or you're not gonna maximize their ability. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to say that, you know, we did this last week, and I don't like how it looked. We're taking it out, right? So if you were, I don't know, you wanted to box squat with a cambered bar, and the athletes never did it before, and they look terrible doing it, don't do it. Simple, stupid is the best, right? Nothing trumps hard work, intensity, and atmosphere. You got a group of guys training for a specific thing. Fire them up, get them going, stick to the simple basics, coach what you can coach what you're good at, and make the most of your program. Especially if with young high school athletes, don't get so caught up in having to feed them new and exotic things all the time. Stick to the basics, train hard, be smart, look at the long-term development of the athlete, start at the end, work your way back to the beginning, and program properly. That's it for this episode of the Beef Lab. I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, I'm going to post a ton of stuff and a bunch of slides from a PowerPoint presentation I did on combine training, and a bunch of templates for our combine program on our show notes. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube page. Please give us a 5-star review on iTunes. It really helps us out. I appreciate all the positive feedback that we get. If you want to connect with me, you can do so at Coach Joe Strong at Instagram, and you can DM me with any of your questions, or you can email us here at Varsity House at info@varsityhousegym.com. I'll see you next time at the Beef Lab.